In this video, what we're going to be doing is modifying our slightly modified Kevin into our final creature. We're going to update not only just the base shape, but we're also going to update all of the facial shapes as the subdivision level 1 changes as the face goes through the different motions, as well as every expression wrinkle that gets modified as, again, like when I do a brow raise, we can change that shape, and we can also modify the expression wrinkles for that shape, as well as the base polypaint. We're going to make it more gaunt and sallow, and then we're also going to go in and change the expression wrinkles and polypaint them as well. Now, before we get too far into this, of course, we're going to want to save, right? So just like we did in the previous project, I'm going to go in here to File, Save As to save a Z project. We're going to dump this right on our desktop. We'll call this Face Tools Demo _001, hit save. And again, that's saving a Z project. Now, I am going to go back to my character creator file. We'll go ahead and do a File, Save Project As. And again, put that right on our desktop. Exact same name. Face Tools Demo _001. That's going to save a CC project. So if I wanted to shut down both Character Creator and ZBrush right now, all I would have to do is load up Character Creator, load up ZBrush, go in here to Preferences, go Z, clear my cache files, and then if I go over here to my Z plugin, drag that over. So if you don't have this open, you can double click this divider to open up this left divider here. You can grab the any menu, you can grab that white circle and just drag it over here to the left. We don't need brush, so we can click that white circle to get rid of it. And you're going to see, if you never used Face Tools before, it automatically installed this Z plugin, ZBrush Face Tools. So if you ever stop in the middle of a project, remember, File, Save As to save your Z project, Character Creator, File, Save As to save a CC project, and then you can, instead of go Zing back and forth, we're going to Face Tools back and forth. But that's how you maintain parity and have two working files that are, you can now relink back and forth. So we're going to update our base head, and then we'll get into expression wrinkles in a bit. And you may have noticed the head shifted a little bit. I'm going to speed run the sculpting part from a previously used sculpted mesh. It's not a huge deal. It's the exact same process. You're not missing anything. I'm just not going to spend a lot of time sculpting a new head. So here we are in ZBrush. We've tossed over our CC head into ZBrush. So let's talk about, number one, what's in Face Tools and also what it's sent over. To reiterate, this Face Tools, the workflow is just for the face. It has nothing to do with the body. Now, after we're done sculpting the head and doing the expressions, we are going to show you how to do the Go Z workflow for the body, just like we did in the Goblin. The Goblin is kind of a reverse workflow from this. We started out with the head and body, and then you can just hop into Face Tools. This workflow that we're showing here is starting with Face Tools and then kind of working our way back to the body. Doesn't matter which way you want to go. Either way is fine. So what Face Tools sent over is basically, here's a CC base body that we're not going to touch because we're using Face Tools. We have a base eyeball, and this eyeball has a texture map applied. So if I go down here and open up texture map, again, this is a tool menu. We're going to grab the little gray area and pull down. Here we have a texture map, and this was just sent over from Character Creator. So if I go into Character Creator here, whatever color map was on the eyeball, it sent it over to ZBrush. And in fact, it looks like it turned on colorize and transferred the polypaint for us. We're going to do that manually with the base head. If you scroll down again and go into geometry, you'll see the eyeball is subdivided up to subdivision level 5. Keep going through here. We have our base eye occlusion, eye winker. All of this stuff can be regenerated when we head back into Character Creator. So don't worry about like changing any, eye shapes or any facial proportions. All of, there will be a dialog menu that'll say, hey, do you want to regenerate these items based on your new topology? You'll say yes. So again, don't worry too much about changing things. You also have base lower teeth, tongue, and base upper teeth, and of course your skin head in here. You're able, in Face Tools, what we're going to do is we're going to change the base head. We're going to do the detailed sculpt. We're going to polypaint it. We're going to do the exact same thing to the teeth. You can change the teeth shapes. You can change the teeth color. And then all of that's going to get sent back to Character Creator, and it's going to be baked. All of the detail and all the polypaint is going to be baked to textures, so it'll run in Character Creator. Very simple, very quick, very easy process. So while we're in Face Tools, remember, you can change the polypaint of your eyeball, your teeth, and your head, and send all of that data back to Character Creator. Now, for the skin head here, the CC base skin head, that's basically your head geometry. It comes in at subdivision level 6. However, I can drop this all the way back down to subdivision level 1. And again, this is the base head and also the base shape layer. Any verts that move on this base head is what's going to end up showing back up in Character Creator. Anything past subdivision level 1 is going to get baked in as a normal map, basically. And remember, subdivision level 6, if we look up here, your poly count is probably over here. Mine is up here. The active points is 4.258 million polygons. So when we go and we polypaint this and we bake it down, that density of geometry is the same as a 2K texture map. You can send back over a 4096 texture map like we showed in the original dialog box when we sent it from Character Creator. You would just need to subdivide this one more time. Just hit that divide button. If you did send it over with the 4096 option, it would divide that one more time for you. But like I said, we're going to stick with the 2K texture resolution, and that 2K is for the head only. So 2048 for the head map. So over here in Z plugin, ZBrush face tools, we'll just walk through this. So the very top button here, you can just click it. You can watch tutorials. You can learn more. You can hit escape on your keyboard to get rid of that. Refresh face tools. Before we started this process, we saved a file of our Character Creator CC file, and we also did a file save as Z project file. If you closed everything down and then opened everything back up, you may need to hit this refresh face tools because, again, we have our base head selected. If we scroll down, we have layers in here, a whole bunch of layers that are represented by these buttons here. So when I click these buttons, it's going to look through your layers and turn it on record mode, basically. Just to make sure it sees everything in your file, all you got to do is hit this refresh face tools if you open up a Z project and you're good to go. Update eyes, teeth, and tongue. You can click this button on. Say if we did a jaw open without that button on, it's going to go through. It's going to turn on the jaw open layer. It's going to put it in record mode. So basically we can go in and sculpt on this jaw open layer. However, you'll notice that the teeth didn't move along with it. Well, we're actually in solo mode. The teeth didn't move along with the jaw. If you had this button on, the lower teeth would move along with the jaw. So I'll go ahead and turn jaw open off. And that's a sneak peek into the expression area, which we'll get into in the next video. Again, working our way down, we have a texture map section here. If we turn on diffuse, that's going to bring over Kevin's texture. So you'll see, again, we have the CC base skin head selected. If we scroll down under texture map, this texture is on. If we turn this off, you'll see it's just our polypaint character, basically, that doesn't have any color applied. So it'll turn this texture on, and it's bringing in, if I go back to Character Creator here, here's our Kevin character. If we go into Material and we choose Skin Head, it's bringing in this base color into ZBrush for us, and we're going to use that as our polypaint base. So we'll head back into ZBrush. If we turn on Range, that's going to swap out that diffuse base color, and it's going to swap it in with this texture map that's called a default range map. This is based on the face topology and UV guide that you can get from Real Illusion. It's on their website. This will go through and explain why these colors are the way they are, why these lines are where they are, what all these pieces represent, why it's important that these polygons stay in these areas. Long story short, and I'll just sculpt in an example real quick here. If you want to see these textures in polypaint a little bit better, I have it on a gray, matte cap gray right now. I'm going to switch over to Skin Shader 4. So we can see it a little bit brighter. And in fact, instead of being on subdivision level 6, I'm going to go to geometry and drop this down to subdivision level 1. So now my polygons match up with the texture map, the range map that's on here. So for example, let's say I want to change the nostrils of my character. I want to make them, a little broader. With my range map on, I can see that ideally this line right here, no matter what your character looks like, and we're going to change this character pretty drastically, we still want that line to kind of go back across the back of the nostril, right? So if I want to make this nostril broader, I'm going to go into my move brush. So B to bring up my brush menu, M to bring up all my brushes that start with M, and then V, or just click on the move brush here. If I want to make these nostrils change, I'm going to take my move brush and I'm going to move this out. Unfortunately, we have our detail layer turned on, which we haven't gotten to yet. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn that off temporarily. So while we're talking about our range map, I can go through here and I can make a base change. And I'll talk a little bit more about detail layers and making changes to our base here. So essentially, if I want to make this nostril wider or broader or bigger, I can go through here and I'm going to do it with my move brush. And the reason I'm showing it to you with the range map is if I undo those changes here, and I go through and I can turn off my range map here. It's really just turning this texture on and off. So it's nothing scary. All these buttons over here aren't doing much. They're just turning on and off different textures. They're turning on and off different layers. So if I go in here and turn off this range button, it's going to go over here and turn off my texture map. I'm going to switch back over to a startup material in my case, which is matte cap gray. So without my range map, I might be inclined to go through here with maybe my standard brush or like a clay brush or something and just start sculpting the nostril bigger like this. The only problem with that is if I go through here and again turn on my range map, now the back of this nostril, you know, the line is here, but the back of my nostril is here. Basically, long story short, you just want to make sure that these lines on this range map end up on the corresponding areas of your creature or your humanoid character. You don't want to start sculpting up here and making this, you know, your brow ridge when your brow ridge lines are right here. You can change your brow ridge. Just go up here and just move this line to where you want your new brow ridge to be. That's all you need to do, as opposed to going in here and just sculpting a new brow ridge up here. So that's all we're really trying to get across, is keep those lines in predictable places. That'll ensure when this thing goes and animates and all the facial shapes go back to Character Creator, all these polygons end up in places where they're supposed to, and your animations will look a lot better. So now let's turn range off, and we'll turn that detail layer back on. So now we're kind of back where we started. Now you can't really see the detail layer here. So I'm going to go back up here to subdivision level 6. And now you can see when we're at a very high subdivision level and our detail layer is on, we see all of that poor detail brought over from, again, that Kevin file. All of this is in a layer. So when I turn that detail layer on, all it did was go into my layers and turn on this detail layer. So if I go in here and turn that eyeball off manually, it will just turn off that detail layer. Or I can go into my ZBrush face tools and turn it off here. And again, all this button is doing is going over to my layers and turning off CC detail layer. Now, here's why ZBrush yelled at me earlier. If you have a layer on, it's going to assume that you want to sculpt to that layer. So in fact, when we have this detail layer on, if you want to make updates to your detail layer, go into your layers and turn on that little circle. That's just going to turn on record. Now, any sculptural changes I do in here will end up on my detail layer. I don't want to sculpt. I'm going to be doing some major changes to my face. I don't want them to end up on the detail layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off record. And in fact, I'm going to turn off that detail layer. I don't want it on. I'm making big face changes. And in fact, what's going to end up happening is my base detail is going to get so high that I don't really even need a detail layer. And now I'm going to show you where you can kind of turn on and off your detail layer and keep it around if you want it. In our case, I'm going to end up just kind of getting rid of it, and I'll show you how to do that. But that is all this is doing, is turning my detail pore layer and micro wrinkle layer on and off. So now, and this is important, if I want to make base changes, remember there's 3 components that we're dealing with here. It's our base head. What is our character? That's what we're focusing on now. After this, it's going to be our shapes and our expressions. And again, our shapes is like jaw open. You know, that's a shape. All those subdivision level 1 geometry is moving so I can open my jaw. And then the expression wrinkles are what wrinkles happen on a high-res normal map while the jaw is opening. But if we're just updating our base mesh here, have everything turned off. That way, any sculpting we're doing, it's not going to put it on a layer. It's going to apply those changes just to this base geometry. So just like anything I start out in ZBrush with, I'm going to go down to subdivision level 1, and I'm going to start, especially for organic models, I'm going to start with this base here. So I'm going to go through here, use my move brush, and we're going to give him, he's a vampire, right? So I'm going to go through here and give him like a bat nose. And again, it's basically, you know, our standard brush, clay tubes, clay buildup, whatever you want to do to go through here and just make this character awesome. You know, Dam standard, the Damien standard brush is a good one. If you want to know more, Google ZBrush Masters. You can watch the ZBrush Masters videos. They'll cover a ton of like really high fidelity sculpting techniques and all that stuff. I'm going to do a little bit of movie magic here to kind of speed along. But again, you know, just like if you didn't have an elf ear, you can go through here and you can move this elf ear stuff around. If you need access to other areas of the model, if you turn on polyframe here, or the hotkey for that is Shift F, you're going to see there's some really awesome polygroups in here that make sculpting a lot easier. So for example, if I want to sculpt on that bottom lip, Control Shift tap this polygroup, and we can turn polyframe off, and you can get access in there. You can also turn on your solo button, which may be further down in your interface. Speaking of, you know, I have a bunch of custom interface stuff on here. If you go to my YouTube channel, there is an intro to ZBrush, 51 videos, all free. You can go and get caught up there if you're new to ZBrush. Same thing on my ArtStation page. If you go here to my main page and go to ZBrush What's New, here's your intro to ZBrush, and here's all the intro to ZBrush video series easily clicked on, and you can go through and get more well acquainted with ZBrush. But basically, here's polyframes. You can Control Shift tap a polyframe, Control Shift tap to bring all your polyframes back. You can Control Shift tap a polygroup, Control Shift drag to invert that polygroup, Control Shift tap to add more polygroups to it. And every single part of your mesh that makes sense is its own polygroup, like the ears, lower jaw, upper jaw. You got a mouth bag in here. You can do Control Shift S to shrink and Control Shift X to expand. That's under your visibility menu here. If I scroll down and go into visibility, you can see shrink and grow. So if I do Control Shift A, that's going to grow all my verts. If you do Control Shift Q, you can hold down Control Shift to grab a little piece of a polygroup and then do Control Shift Q to grow to your polygroup if you want. But anyway, that's just polygroup selection here. And then as we're detailing our face, we'll start with subdivision level 1. Again, this is just dialing in our big shapes, and then go to subdivision level 2. We're going to start getting into a little more, you know, primary forms and our secondary forms. Subdivision level 3, you're just going through here and you're sculpting, and you're using your clay buildup brush and your clay brush and your smooth brush to go through here. Again, to kind of dial in those shapes that you want. Now, be careful that you don't start building in expressions into your, oh, and this is the DAM standard O2 brush. It's really cool for creature work, so definitely check that out. Now, one thing you want to be careful of is you don't want to start going in here and like dialing in like an angry expression, right? We're going to have an expression for that face. So this is a neutral face. Don't go through and try to make him mean necessarily. You want a neutral face. It could be creepy, it can be evil, but you don't want to dial in an expression just yet, because we're going to have expressions to dial in later. So like I said, I'm going to do a little movie magic here. I'm going to go to BMG, my morph brush. I have another file that I can morph in, and essentially at subdivision level 3, this is probably where I'm going to be at, the level of detail I'm going to be at. I'm going through, I'm sculpting, I'm using my clay brush, and we're going through here and doing our primary and secondary forms, basically. Maybe a little more detailed than what I would normally get into, but you can see we're getting like a saggy kind of neck in here. His ears are a little modified, a little bit of wrinkle indication. He's got some bumps on his little vampire nose here. So essentially, this is where I would be at about subdivision level 3. Now at this point, like I was saying, if you want to turn on your detail layer, and again, we'll go back up to subdivision level 6, between your subdivision level 3, your primary and secondary, even a little bit of tertiary form, and your pore detail level, you can stop right here. You don't have to go any further. This could be plenty for you to say, okay, we're basically done. Again, if you want to go and make changes to your detail layer, sculpt in more pores or put in more wrinkles or something, you can just turn on that record button and do that. What I tend to do is, and I'm going to show you, when I'm sculpting, I usually forget I have a detail layer, so I just put in all my details into the base sculpt. If that's the case and your detail layer is just adding more noise to the noisy sculpt you're about to make, which is what I did, you can go in here to your detail layer. I'm going to say make a new layer underneath it. I'm going to click on my detail layer here. I'm going to turn this value for my detail layer down to 0. And then with my untitled layer I just made up to 1, I'm going to do a merge down. And now my detail layer, even when it's turned on, doesn't have any effect. That way, when I send everything back to Character Creator and it turns the detail layer back on and tries to bake any details from that layer to my mesh, it's got nothing to bake. It's not going to have any effect. Speaking of what I just did, you kind of want to be careful with adding new layers and adding new geometry in here. Two things you don't want to do. You certainly don't want to change the name of anything sent over from face tools. That's why we go up here to File, Save As, a Save As E project. If you were to go to Tool, Save As, it would rename your very first model, and you don't want that. You don't want that. So don't change any names that are in your subtool stack, as well as don't change any names that are in your layer stack. And in fact, don't even make a layer that has like CC underscore something. You don't want to confuse face tools. It's juggling a lot of files. So leave your layer names alone. Don't add any new layers that are going to be confusing to it. You can add layers and you can add subtools. That's not a problem. Just don't do anything that's going to confuse what face tool needs. It's looking for very specific files and layers. Don't make any unnecessary changes to those or delete any of them, basically. So like I said, when I'm going through and detailing, I'm on subdivision level 6 here. Again, I still want to be sculpting on my base layer, and if I scroll down, I have my detail layer turned on. It doesn't have anything in it, but it still thinks I want to sculpt on it maybe. So again, I'm going to turn that detail layer off. I'm on subdivision level 6. And with everything off, I'm just going in and updating my base mesh. So, you know, go through here and sculpt in all your detail with your dam standard brush, your dam standard 02, your clay buildup brush, adding in all the skin direction lines, pore detail, any of that good stuff. And again, I may end up doing a video at some point to go through the detailing process. It's not rocket science. It's basically just spending time, you know, dialing in details. And you're seeing all of the details I'm putting in here, I could have absolutely added to my detail layer. In fact, if I wanted to, I could have turned that detail layer on and turned on record, use this morph brush, morphing in detail from another file, which is what's happening here, the movie magic that's happening. And then with that file or that layer on record, I could absolutely transfer all this fine wrinkle detail to that layer. So you can juggle a lot of really easy stuff in ZBrush if you want to. Again, I'm just doing it manually, but at the end of the day, this is what my sculpt would end up looking like at subdivision level 6. So that's all fine and good, but what about our polypaint? Because remember, we had our Kevin, if we go back to character creator here, we have all this cool skin color available to us. In order to access that, I'm going to go over here and turn on our texture map diffuse. That's going to bring in our Kevin texture. If I scroll down, again, our base head is selected. I'm going to scroll down, open our texture map. You'll see our texture map is on, so I can see this a little bit better. I'm going to switch this over to Skin Shader 4. And what I want to do is transfer this texture map, this 2048 texture map, however many pixels that is, I'm going to transfer that to my polygons. And in ZBrush, that's called polypaint. In any other program, it's called vertex color. So it's transferring this texture color to my verts colors. And because I have 4.258 million points to transfer to, it's going to maintain that 2048 level of detail. So again, ensure that you're on subdivision level 6 because you want as many polygons as possible to transfer this data to. And then with our texture map on and everything else turned off, you don't want your detail layer on. You want this going to just to your base mesh. Go into your polypaint menu and choose polypaint from texture. It's going to tell you mRGB draw mode is off. Our standard brush is chosen. It usually has Z add-on by default. Doesn't matter what brush you have. Just go over here and turn on mRGB, and then it'll allow you to say polypaint from texture. You're going to see it turn my texture off. So what you're seeing here is not from a texture. It is literally the polygons with RGB information on them. If you scroll up, you'll see colorized is turned on for my base head, this little paintbrush icon. If we scroll back down, I'm going to shut down all of these. The polypaint menu, this colorize button right here, when we turn that on and off, that's basically turning this paintbrush on and off. So we've transferred our texture to our polygons. So it's just RGB information being carried by our high-res sculpt here. And now we can go through and do any sort of, polypaint changes that we want. In fact, if we scroll back down, underneath polypaint, you can do adjust colors and hit the frame button here. And then now we can see our head a little bit better. You can go through here and you can change like your RGB contrast. Again, I'm going to make this guy kind of sallow looking, kind of sickly yellow, deep, dark circles under his eyes. We can take his saturation down if we want to. You can play around with any of these. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do in here, but essentially that's all I'm really going to do. I'm going to hit OK, and that's going to modify my polypaint. And again, you can go in here and paint on here. If you want, you can use your standard brush. Just turn off Z-Add, turn on RGB. M is if you want to paint with materials or materials and color. I'm just painting with color, so just have that on. You have RGB intensity in here, so if you want to drop that down, have your standard brush go in here to a spray stroke, or maybe keep it on dot stroke and swap out the alpha to maybe alpha 23. And you can go through here and paint. Now, if you just start painting, it's going to want to paint a white color. And you'll also notice it has a little red rubber band behind your stroke that's smoothing it out. That is your lazy mouse. If you go into the stroke menu, go in here to lazy mouse, you'll see that's on by default. You can just tap L on your keyboard or just turn that button off, and that'll turn off your lazy mouse. You can tap L to turn it back on if you want. But again, we don't want to paint with white. We want to paint with this color. Instead of going through here and trying to choose that color, you can hover over anything in anything in ZBrush really. But on your model here, you can tap C while you're hovering. So if we go over here on the lip and tap C, you'll see it'll get that magenta color. Up here on his forehead, it'll give us that kind of skin tone. So you can just, again, tap C on your keyboard, or you can click and drag from the palette onto your mesh, and it'll go through and pick that color wherever you drop it, essentially. So I'm going to go through here with my standard brush, RGB intensity down just a bit, and kind of fill in this area here. We can go in and, punch up some of these areas, or in fact, let's turn off this alpha here. Let's go in here to like a bluish kind of color. We can kind of paint in this vein. Again, maybe not RGB 44%. Let's go down to 12%. We can go through here and just kind of give a little blue tint to that vein. Go through and just paint this thing up however you'd like. There's a lot of different ways to go and apply polypaint in ZBrush. And like usual, anything in ZBrush you want to know, you can go to my YouTube channel, just type it in. Type in polypaint, for example. Here's creature and cavity polypainting in here. If you keep scrolling down, there's using spotlight polypainting skin from photos. Polypaint adjust is one of the things we did. So a lot of polypaint functionality that you can play around with. Now, like I said, I'm going to use a little bit of movie magic here. And I'm just going to go through and just kind of paint. And you'll see this is where I ended up with my polypaint. Again, it's not that different. Just a little more sallow, a little more dead skin. I've got some under the skin veins kind of painted on here, so you can kind of see where I was going with this. Now, the cool thing is, remember, we changed our skin tone. If we go back to Character Creator, he's a fairly tan, healthy looking guy, but back in ZBrush, we're really kind of fading him out quite a bit. Character Creator is going to be smart enough to know that since we changed our skin tone, it'll actually go through and change our body tone as well. But anyway, I just wanted to show you where I would end up once I'm done kind of poly painting my vampire head here. Now, speaking of poly painting, if I alt tap the eyes here, that'll select the eye subtool, or you can go to your subtool stack and just select it. I'm going to go into solo mode here. We can change the poly paint on our eyeball. This again will get baked back over when I go back to Character Creator. So easy way to do that. If I want to change the color, for example, I can hold down Control and I can mask. That's like turn on X symmetry here. I can hold down Control and mask out the little iris section here. And now when I go into the polypaint menu, say adjust colors, hit frame. I'm going to cancel out of that. So I masked out the iris. I'm going to Control tap, or on my tablet, or you can go in here to masking and just choose inverse. So that way the irises are unmasked. So now when I go in here to adjust colors, I can actually click hide mask. Then I can go through here and I can change, my hue. So if I want to give him, red eyes or blue eyes, I can change the RGB intensity or the saturation of the eyeballs if I want. Then when I'm done, I can hit OK. I can go through here and change the pupils. So maybe I want to say stay with my standard brush, or if you wanted to use your paintbrush, it's B to open your brush menu, P to narrow it down to the brushes that start with P, and then A is your paint brush, and all that is your standard brush with RGB turned on, RGB intensity up to 100. So I'm going to tap C to sample this black color, and then we can go through here and give him pointy cat eye irises. Now you'll see I'm not perfectly symmetrical on my eyes. For the mask, it was okay. For this, I'm going to turn off X symmetry, and I'm just going to do this one by one. You'll also notice that this eyeball has a toy. If I grab from my shader ball onto this, it'll pick a toy plastic on here. So that's the material that's assigned. So even if I switch back to Skin Shader 4, it has the toy shader material assigned. So that's what's going on there. That's why we're seeing such a shiny eyeball here. And again, you can tap L to turn off lazy mouse in your standard brush if you want. So again, you can go as crazy as you want with these eyes. Let's go turn off solo mode, and don't forget your teeth. So if we go down here to our teeth, let's say base lower teeth, let's go into solo mode. Here's our base lower teeth. We don't have colorize turned on, so whatever color we choose in here, it's going to update on your model. If we do turn colorize on, it'll show you, hey, we just have white color on your verts here. So if we want, we can go down here again. If we go into our texture map, you'll see we do have a texture map we can apply to our teeth. However, see how low res this is? Not a whole lot of detail in our polygon. So if we were at this point to say, hey, let's go into polypaint and transfer our polypaint from our texture. Number one, make sure your RGB intensity is at 100. So when you do that, it goes 100%. So again, polypaint from texture. It's going to be a pretty low res. If I turn my texture on, you'll see we got a little detail in here. If I turn it off, you'll see the polygons in here. We have so few verts, it can't really transfer a whole lot of detail. So what we need to do, the eyeballs were already subdivided, the teeth aren't. I'm going to divide this one up to subdivision level 5. So now we're up to 318,000 points. So now when I go back down here and say transfer my polypaint from my texture, now we're getting all of that detail transferred to our teeth. Now you'll see we have kind of a problem here, and two problems actually. If I turn on my polyframe and then go back up here and turn off colorize temporarily, you'll see that this is all one polygroup. The teeth aren't a separate polygroup. That's easy enough to fix. Another problem I have is these teeth aren't actually going into the gums. So two ways we can handle this. If I go back into my brush menu here, grab that white dot and drag it over here to my docking area on the left. If we go in here to auto masking, you're going to see there's a topological button here. So if I change to my move brush, which I've already done with the hotkey, but BMV, switching to your move brush, if you turn on topological, that will essentially tell ZBrush when I go to move something, whatever I touch first, it will just move that object. And because these teeth are completely separate from the gums, they're not vert welded or anything, it will allow me just to move this one tooth back into the gums, no problem. In fact, since he's a vampire, I can go through here and, make these teeth as crazy as I want. Now, if you did want to grab just one of these teeth, ZBrush 2024 has a new feature. If I scroll down to the masking menu, there is a mask grow all and a mask shrink all. So with mask grow all, I can control drag over a little piece of that tooth, say grow all, control tap to invert that. And now I don't even need topological turned on. I can just go in here and just move that tooth right into the gums. Now there's masking grow all. There is, like I mentioned before, I believe, a visibility grow all as well. So if I hold down Control Shift, that goes into the visibility drag rect modifier. So if I Control Shift drag over a little piece of the gum here and then do Control Shift A, that is the hotkey for visibility grow all. So now I have all of my gums showing. So I can Control Tap to mask all my gums, Control Shift Tap to bring everything else back. And now I have all of my teeth unmasked and all of my gums masked. But again, if I go back in here and I turn on colorize, yes, I have some color on here, but it's not really, maybe I want this to be a little more gnarly. So Control drag over this, do masking, grow all, and now I just have access to my teeth. I'm going to go through here. I could go to polypaint adjust, or I can just go in here and choose like just kind of a darkish brown color. Go in here to color, fill object, go back to my standard brush or my paintbrush, have RGB selected, maybe turn down the RGB intensity a little bit. Let's go to a brighter kind of yellowish color. And then I can go through here and I can just kind of paint in a little bit. I can go through here with my damn standard O2 brush. I can dig in some deep notches on these teeth here. Switch back to my standard brush, go through here and paint. I can go to a lighter tooth color. I can go through here and again, I can just poly paint this. I can go to a smaller brush, just tap S on my keyboard, make my draw size smaller. I can hit C to sample, maybe drag this a little more orange and dark. I can go through here and I can kind of paint in, some gross kind of plaque detail on here. And essentially go through here, polypaint your eyes, polypaint your tongue, polypaint your teeth, polypaint your face. All of this can get transferred back over to Character Creator and baked out as a texture map. So once you've done that, again, here I have my head and I go into solo mode. I've done my lower teeth, I've done my upper teeth. I didn't do anything in my tongue, that's okay. So with two things I can do here, I can continue on to expression wrinkles, or I can take what I've done now and transfer that back to Character Creator. And again, we haven't done expression shapes, we haven't done expression wrinkles yet. All we've done is update our base head. And that's totally fine. You can send this already back to Character Creator and just update your base head. So let's go ahead and do that. So back in ZBrush, we're going to, I'll go ahead and close out of the brush menu here. So again, in our Z plugin menu, we have ZBrush face tools here. I'm going to go ahead and turn off this diffuse layer. And at the very bottom here, we have an update to character creator button. Go ahead and click that button. It's going to bring up a dialog box. And all we're doing, again, we haven't touched expressions or shapes yet. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that checkbox off. That's going to turn off everything on the right-hand side. We haven't gotten there yet. Over here on the left, we have base update. Yes, we are updating our base head. We're updating the base mesh. And again, that's the subdivision level 1. Any verts that have moved are going to be transferred back to character creator. We definitely want to have this turned on. We did update the polypaint. When we transferred our texture to our polygons and then we polypainted on top of it or with it, that's all been changed. So we definitely want to check that on. We do want to bake our details to a normal map. We do want to bake our cavity to a blend map. We're doing a 2048 size. We've updated the head, the teeth, we didn't update the tongue, so we can uncheck that, and we'd updated the eye. So all of this we can have checked on. I'm going to hit update to character creator, and that's going to bake all of our polypaint to a texture, send that over to character creator. It's going to plug that texture into the material. It's going to bake all of our details that we've made to character creator. It's going to change any of the vert positions that we've changed, like the ears or the jaw or the brow ridge. It's going to send that back to character creator as well. And it's going to tell you it's been successfully exported. You can switch to character creator to view the results. You can just tap in your document and it'll keep doing some stuff in ZBrush. Don't worry about that. Hop over to character creator and it's going to have a dialog box open. I would keep all of these at the default. Any vert positions we've changed in our subdivision level 1, we want to adjust our bones to fit our morphs. So that's basically what that means. It's going to generate and realign our tier line. So if you made any eyeball changes, that little wet tier line will update. Eye occlusion, there's a piece of geometry over the eye that gives it a really nice occlusion around the eyeball. So it looks like the eyeball sitting in the head. So that'll go ahead and generate and realign. And again, like I said, we've updated our polypaint. So it's going to apply that polypaint to our head. And so it blends into the body. It's going to adjust the body skin tone to compensate for our head change. So we'll hit update. And there we go. If we zoom out, you're going to see our body skin has changed to compensate for our head skin change. We've got our gnarly character in here from our crazy detailed sculpt. If I want to see how he looks, I can go in here to motion, wrinkle check. We'll do dramatic male. And I can already tell you there's going to be a problem. And that's when we go and we blend in our expressions, it's still going to have Kevin's skin tone on those expressions, but we're going to fix that. So when I hit play here, when his brow goes up, Kevin's nice tan skin is going to show up. But you can see that the rest of the face is moving around great. All of the lines in the face, we didn't really make any bad decisions when it came to, when we moved around the face. It's not doing anything particularly weird. You will see in this area here, and in fact, let's go ahead and say motion, pose, a pose. If you want to, do a manual check, you can go in here to the motion tab, go in here to edit facial, and you can turn on, for example, this one here, which is head orientation. If you just click this on and then click in a blank area, you can go through here and move the head around. You can double click to turn off, deselect everything, and then you can go through here and you can select these groups and go through here and change these. You can go into expression and just dial in completely. You can go in here to angry, for example, or happy. That's good enough. On some of these, you'll notice on the happy expression, the teeth are poking through. You can either go through and change, when we get into the expression layers, which we haven't gotten into yet, you can pull the mouth out a little bit so that the teeth don't poke through, or you can move the teeth back, whatever you want to do. But again, we haven't changed any expression shapes yet. So these are all fixes we can make. So we're going to say reset to 0. Our head is working. The details have been transferred over from our base. So I'm going to go in here to File, Save Project As. We'll call this Face Demos Base Update. And then same thing back in ZBrush, File, Save As, Base Update. Now in the next video, what we're going to cover is everything over here in this expression area. We're going to update all of our expression shapes. And remember, the shapes are the subdivision level 1 shape. So when I do jaw open, you can change any of the subdivision level 1 verts, and that'll be your new shape back in Character Creator. We're also going to get into expression wrinkles. So when my eyebrow up shape changes, it's going to compress, and I'm going to get a bunch of wrinkles up here. all of that wrinkle data, anything from subdivision level 2 to 6, is going to get baked to a normal map, and we're going to talk about that again in the next video.